Hi, welcome to Future Proofing. I'm your host Ekalavya, and this show is presented by Intel vPro, built for business. In this show, we talk about Web3, blockchain, NFTs, a little bit of sense, some nonsense, but a whole lot of fun. Today's episode is special. Today is all about music. And music is one of the fields where we've seen probably the most action when it comes to Web3 and the blockchain. And today we have a very special guest lined up for you. Rarely do you meet someone who cuts across generations. He got us hooked to music demand shows in the early 2000s. He pretty much revolutionized EDM music in India, a fantastic VJ, a great host, and also someone who made it okay to tell your parents that you want to be a DJ as you grow up. Join us on the other side of this Intel vPro break on a fascinating conversation about music and Web3 with none other than Nikhil Chinapa. Hi, welcome back. In our studio today is Nikhil Chinapa. Thank you for being here, Nikhil.
It's such a pleasure to be here, man. It's been a while since we've last met. I think you were talking about when we met maybe 9 years ago when we were doing an MTV show together, and there was chaos and pandemonium, and I think there was a pig involved as well.
Yes.
There was a large pig involved.
A huge pig.
That's a different story. We'll get into pigs and other animals on another podcast, but it is so good to see you again, Eka.
So glad that you're here. You know, Nikhil, before the show, I was talking to my producer, and he was asking me, Eka, you have so many guests, right? And which one do you think has truly future-proofed themselves in terms of coolness and relatability? And I was like, let me see. Late 90s, super cool on television, 2000s to 2010, VJ, festival curator, EDM revolutionizer in India, 2011 to 20, still killing it, still being relatable to the next generation. How do you do it, Nikhil? And what's the role which music has played in all this?
I like how you make it sound like I've had a plan through all of this, when the truth is I've been as far away from making plans as possible. And I think the lesson to this generation is, terrible lesson though, don't have a plan. Just like wing it from the get-go. That actually is an awful plan. I think you need to have some sort of plan. And I think my plan was to try and excel at everything that I did. Everything that I tried to get into, I gave it 110%. There was never any way of doing things half-heartedly. And I think it also has a lot to do with just being lucky, right place, right time. You know, the early 2000s was when the economy was opening up in India. People were experimenting with many different things, including travel, adventure, music, festivals, events. Clubs were opening up. People were listening to different forms of music. It coincided with the birth of and the propagation of the internet in India, which then coincided with the explosion in online websites like, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, which was a huge influence in our lives as well, which coincided with Tomorrowland having this amazing after movie that just kind of exploded in 2011. And then the whole world wanted to go to music festivals. So I think a lot of things happened at the right time in the right place. And I happened to just be in the middle of all of it. Just this kid looking around, trying to have fun and trying to play music that I loved and shared with other people as well. And things just kind of snowballed and took off. Into outer space.
That's so awesome, Nikhil. Nikhil, so our show is about Web3 and and this episode's about evolution of music. Tell me, before we dive into the whole music conversation, what's your first memory of the internet or the web?
Being at a friend's house in Bangalore, and I used to go and visit him quite often because he had the best CD collection ever.
Okay.
And they had the internet. He had the internet in his house, and it used to take him a couple of hours to establish a connection. There was this sound that would keep happening from the computer.
Dial up.
And then nothing would happen. And then we'd go back to listening to the next CD, right? And then we'd finish that CD and the dial-up would still be going. No connection. So that, and another friend of mine who was I studied architecture, and she was applying to a college in America. And she came from the computer lab and I said, what were you doing there? And she said, I got an email from my college. And I went, what the heck is that? She said, well, it's like a letter, but it comes to you on the computer. I'm like, why do we need that? Because we've got letters, right? The post office still works. Why do you need to send letters through the computer? Just write the damn letter, put an address on it, stick a stamp, and mail it. And of course, that's a fantastic analogy or an anecdote on how things are evolving right now. Because when people say, why do we need Web3? Why do we need Bitcoin? Why do we need cryptocurrency? Why do we need decentralization? What the heck is blockchain? I'm like, well, do you remember when you used to have email and used to say, why do we need email when the post just works fine? Why do we need a different monetary system? the dollar and the rupee works just fine. Well, actually it doesn't, but that's another story. That's a very long story about how fiat currencies are just, programmed to fail.
We'll dive a little more into that a little later. Before that, Nikhil, great. So probably mid-90s dial-up connection, and then of course internet became what we know of today. Let's talk a little about music consumption, right? Music consumption, probably when the internet came in, you mentioned it was still CDs. It would probably take you an hour to download an MP3, right? But eventually MP3s revolutionized music online, right? And killed a lot of record labels, killed a lot of music channels. Probably tell us a little about, how consumption patterns have changed of music probably over the last 2.5 decades.
It's something that I spend some time thinking about. I don't devote a lot of time to it, but music is obviously something very valuable and personal to people from the time they're about 8 or 9 years old, especially through their teenage years. And then depending on what your interaction with music is or how passionate you are, your consumption patterns or the amount of time you spend listening to music evolves. Once you get busy with other things in life, career, work, other interests, social life, and so on and so forth. But music as an element is... people talk about the soundtrack of their college days, the soundtrack of their youth. What they're basically talking about is the music that was popular or they listened to when they were of a particular age. You also hear stories of how a certain smell can create a rush of memories, or when you first smelt that, or where you were when you ate that particular food. And the same thing happens with music as well. But more recently, and I'm going to jump very quickly to the present day now, and especially for for platforms like TikTok and Reel and things like that, what music means to this generation has evolved from being something that they listen to on long drives, or they listen to for pleasure, or they listen to when they're with their girlfriend, or they listen to when they're creating memories for themselves, to something that they need to attach to a video product in order to get more views.
So, the real generation, right?
The real generation.
Yes,
and that's
completely.
very interesting. I mean, one of the things that the real generation has done is that it's turned music from, back in the day when I started listening to music, albums were valuable, right? Of course, the albums had singles, and one single from the album would become a super hit. Bryan Adams' Summer of 69 is India's unofficial national anthem. Yeah, exactly. But the album itself, I forget the name, but there was a song there where he collaborated with Tina Turner. There was a song called, Everywhere We Go, Kids Wanna Rock. There was a whole bunch of really cool music on that album. So we used to listen to albums, and I love listening to the entire Metallica Black Album. I love listening to the Iron Maiden Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. And from there we shifted to when the CD generation came out. It became sort of easier and quicker to buy singles, and then radio would start to push singles. And now from the singles generation, we've started to move towards clips.
Okay.
Which is what goes on to Reels and TikTok.
There were videos, right? After radio, probably video came in, and then music videos.
Video was a parallel platform.
Okay.
Live performances were a parallel platform. I'm just talking about the consumption of music. People went from listening to full-length albums to listening to singles to listening to maybe streaming podcasts, and music on streams where algorithms would create.
15 seconds.
And now it's 15 seconds of music. So what's happening is people who are writing music in order to be successful and to make money are now thinking in 15 seconds. As opposed to thinking of an album and telling a story through an album, people are now thinking of music in 15 seconds, which is awful for the creation of music and for the quality of music that's coming out.
That's so true. I was asked Ekalavya, what's the last album you've bought? And I was like, what do you mean by that? Man? What do you mean by buying an album, right? Honestly, I was part of a generation which didn't like paying for music because Napster came in, and then probably the generation which killed music, monetization of music, and we were downloading MP3 files. And then at least now there's a generation which is paying for streaming and probably downloading and paying for downloads, right? But there was this huge space for 10 years where how are musicians making money in from 2001 to 2010, Nikhil?
Well, I think you when you're talking about Napster and streaming, you're talking about one aspect of music, which is the listening of music.
Yeah.
Experiencing music can happen in different ways.
Of course.
Right? The live performances became a very important aspect of revenue or revenue streams for musicians and artists as the recording industry started to get killed off because of piracy and of MP3. But streaming brought that back. Streaming brought royalties and money back into recording music and started to pay artists for, writing good music and for having that song played multiple times. And we can debate about how much money artists get paid by some of the big streaming platforms across the world. And I'm on the artist side. They don't get paid enough.
Peanuts, right?
But having said that, the artists have to take have to shoulder some part of the blame, because you end up signing contracts that give away a lot of your rights. And if you start to do that early on in your career, and when that song becomes a big hit, or when you become a big artist, you realize that you've actually signed a terrible contract and you're not getting paid enough. So there's a long story to that, which is, we could do another podcast about that.
But I'll definitely bring that point back a little later, right? Because contracts, smart contracts goes hand in hand, right? Like we're talking about Web3, okay? And Web3 is about, being part, it's more open, it's more like ownership, where people like artists are coming back to the forefront, right? And or you want to dive into that right now?
I mean, we can dive into it right now, and I'll be very blunt about this. I think most people, including artists, are more concerned about making money than they are about utility. Okay. Web3 and smart contracts are great for utility, and you can of course build many layers on top of that, and you can create great value both for the artist and for the fan.
Okay.
But when you're a struggling artist and you're living in your parents' bedroom and you don't have any money, and you don't have money to go on a date with your girlfriend or top up your cell phone credit, you're willing to do anything in order to get recognized and noticed, which means you will go to the places that have the largest volume of traffic, the largest amount of consumers that are already there, which in this case tends to be places like YouTube. Right? You start putting your music up for free on YouTube or on SoundCloud. You don't have any smart contracts in play over there because you're hoping to get noticed, and you can't get noticed living in isolation. Unfortunately, the big issue that we have right now with blockchain and with Web3 is that it feels like an echo chamber.
Okay.
It feels like an exclusive club. All the people who are developing programs, platforms, protocols for Web3, it feels like an old boys club.
But it's supposed to be open, right? Like that's exactly what Web3 is not supposed to be.
It is supposed to be.
Yeah.
But Web 2 had Facebook and Twitter that kind of made everybody access and use Web 2.
Yeah, more interactive.
I am still waiting for that tool in Web 3, and maybe it'll come through gaming. I don't know.
Okay.
That'll make people go, oh, so this is what Web 3 is. Right now, what's happening with most of the platforms on Web 3 is that it just feels like preaching to the choir. It's the same bunch of people talking to each other. How do you get somebody who's not into Web3 go, hey, this is fun, come and join us?
Okay, so let's jam a little on that, right? So here's a suggestion, and of course, maybe it's going to be debunked, but a smart contract. Okay, so imagine a musician wants to make money, right? So it's the point is, it's not just the musicians which are not making money. A lot of people feel it's the record labels which are taking a chunk of the money. It is the streaming platforms which are taking a chunk of the money, right? So people are saying that as a musician, on a decentralized platform, so when you put up a piece of music, it's not belonging to a platform, you still own it. It's going to be more open, where every time someone hears it, every time the song a reel is made out of it, every time the song is performed somewhere, automatically using the blockchain technology, you will get your 1 cent, 2 cent, $1, etc. without you as a musician or your agent or your manager having to go chase after record labels saying, but this is what we had signed up for. You had told us you will give us so much money. So many people are listening to it. So as a technological solution to probably distribution and monetizing music, do you think there's any scope in it? Does it make sense? Or at the end of the day, people don't care too much. They just want fame and their money. Abhi chahiye paisa, and then baad ka we'll think of it later.
From a technology point of view, I think it's brilliant. I think it's going to be game changing for the music industry. And I honestly believe that technology has been what's rescued the music industry every time it's been in strife. It wasn't the record labels that saved the music industry, quite honestly. It was Spotify. It was Ghana. It was Savan. It was Tencent. It was all of these streaming platforms that came around and created a different business vertical and a different money stream for artists and for record labels via streaming. The record labels didn't come up with that plan. And even now, the record labels, I don't believe they have a plan. And I think technology is what's going to help people monetize their assets much better going forward. But it requires mass adoption.
Okay.
Right now, most musicians across the world still don't know how to access Web3, still don't know what the blockchain is or how they should interact with it. And that's the biggest problem.
But do you know musicians at least understand Web 2 aspect of it? So this is for our young musicians, right? Who want to probably put their music out there. So is it still like a technological nightmare to upload your stuff on, say, Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube? Or you're thinking like this generation pretty much understands this right from the get-go?
I think if you've taken music seriously, you've done some of your homework, and I think you do have an understanding, or the information is out there. You can get it. I recently had a conversation with a Web3 platform that was offering to put up your music for free across all the major platforms in the world, like a distribution service. In return, they would also collect royalties for you and pay you all those royalties into an NFT that was on their platform.
Okay.
And the only way they made their money is they would earn off the interest on your royalties, but you would get your royalties in full. Sounds like a great plan, right? So there's always people that are coming up with interesting ideas and concepts and building for the future in various industries. But it requires mass adoption, and that's where I think there's a bit of a pain point. The onboarding system for Web3 and blockchain is a nightmare right now. The KYCs that you've got to go through to have to set up a wallet address and to get onto any kind of decentralized platform is crazy. So, and I know there are companies solving for that as well. But until and unless that happens and we don't get mass adoption, I don't see how this is really going to become a movement. The technology is there. You're right. It exists. But in order for the technology to be viable, it needs to get to a tipping point of users. And then once the whole world starts to do that, that's when it really becomes sort of a living, breathing entity on its own, and then it has a life of its own after that.
Very interesting. Nikhil, a little about, we've used the word decentralized a lot. When someone says a decentralized music platform, what is it? Like, just try to explain what's a decentralized music platform.
I have no idea. You tell me what it is. I'm pretty sure it's out there. I mean, people are building things all the time, and it's very, very difficult to try and keep track of these things. But what you mentioned about smart contracts, about getting paid automatically, great. That's a great idea. But what if that young, struggling artist, I mean, if you're Coldplay, sure, do smart contracts. Everything is nice and locked in and everybody wants your music and they'll be happy to give you what you want.
You're already popular, right? Yeah.
But if you're a struggling indie artist sitting in Bhopal or in Indore or in Mumbai and you've put out this song and you've got your friends to get together and shoot a music video on Marine Drive, you're going to want to put that music video on YouTube. You're not going to get any money off that. Or barely any money off that, because YouTube is where all the kids are right now. Yeah. You're going to put it up on platforms where people are already existing, sampling, like on Instagram, and you're not going to make much money off it.
And then hope that someone virals it on a reel, right?
Yep.
And then hope that eventually a Web3 platform will come to you and say, we will do this for you, right?
So the secret to success as a musician, to succeed in Web3, is to not think about it from a Web3 perspective, is to think about your own life cycle as a musician. Early on in life, you will need solutions that are more basic. You will need feet on the street. You will need Web2 platforms. You will need to play at college events for free. You will need to busk on the street. You will need to do all those things to build a name for yourself. Once you start building a name for yourself is when things start to get interesting. And then you try and figure out where you can get some money from to make a decent music video. Who pays for that music video? Do you crowdsource it? That's where Web3 can come in as well. And then how you grow from there. Then your touring becomes very interesting. Do you crowdsource your touring efforts? Do you tour in places where you have the most amount of listeners or viewers for your music videos or for your streams? And how you go about accessing that information. Again, decentralization could help you with that, because right now, even though you have Spotify for artists, they're very reluctant to give you any real data on what you should be doing, right? Data is a very, very precious commodity because we don't know what's happening there. Neither does the CIA, neither does the FBI. Nobody seems to know what's happening
there. You don't know who's listening to you a lot of times, right, as a musician?
I think so. But I guess Spotify also is working on those aspects because they understand that it's a pain point for their artists. So a lot of people are working on many different things, but there is no one magic bullet, Eka. If you want to succeed in this space, and even if you want to succeed just in Web3, there is no one magic bullet.
It's not like you just can't say Web3 as a musician and fat karke music money will happen.
And not everything needs to be Web3. This is really important for people who are getting into Web3 or who are evangelists in the Web3 space, as you and I are. We also need to explain to people that listen, sometimes a Web2 solution might just be the best solution for that product or for that project. Everything and anything doesn't need to be Web3, which is where Bitcoin maximalists and I sort of disagree a little bit.
A little about, you mentioned crowdsourcing, right? And platforms like Kickstarter, etc. And again, we spoke about a little, young musicians, probably young indie musicians who maybe have the it factor. So right now, as I understand it, right, like you have to either be a musician and put something on YouTube and hope it virals, and then you're hoping people will reach out to you. But if you're not a viral sensation, if you're good, if you're not great, but if you're good and no record label is willing to sign you on, right? Is there a scope where you put up a piece of content and say, this is me right now, and I may have some talent, but here is an opportunity for you to be part of my long-term journey. Invest in me. Probably in terms of time, money, etc. And you will own 1% of my royalties for life. Is this more fictional? It's good. Like, is it more, theoretical, or you actually see this happening? Have you ever invested in like a young musician who says, "Sir, please listen to my track and please invest or please help me"? Do you think there's some scope in this?
So I'm that paradoxical creature that deeply believes in NFTs, but I haven't purchased a single NFT.
I was just going to ask you that.
Okay. And here is why. Because again, going back to my earlier point that people want to make money and they don't want to really build utility, I think the real power and potential of NFTs lies in the utility factor. Okay?
What is the utility? What will make
I'll get to that.
What will make Nikhil Chinapa buy an NFT?
In the music, let's talk about the music space first, right? You spoke about a young musician who says, hey, I think I've got a lot of potential and I'm going to be amazing. My career is going to be amazing. I'm going to make a lot of money. So let me fractionalize my brand. Let me fractionalize who I am into multiple NFTs, maybe 10 NFTs, maybe 10,000 NFTs. And you can own a piece of me for the rest of my career. Okay. That is pretty much what most NFT projects have already done right now. It depends on the founder. You know, when you're investing in an NFT, you always say, do your own research, check out who the development team is, check out who the people behind the project are, who the founders are. But the day the founder loses interest, the day the founder says, oh, I made a lot of money, let me just pack up and go off to the Bahamas or to Miami or to a private island off the coast of West Africa. It's gone. All the utility, all the value, all the community is gone because it depends on that founder. It's the same issue with the musician, right? It is a punt that people will need to take. It's like taking a punt on a penny stock. But if you have a young musician, let's say Ankur Tiwari about 10 or 15 years ago, Pratik Kuhar about 10 or 15 years ago, and you see that potential, you see that drive in that person, and you've seen that perform at the Blue Frog in Mumbai, you've seen them perform at High Spirits in Pune, you've seen them perform at these places, and you can kind of gauge based on the crowd reaction, the songwriting skill of the artist, the kind of shows that they're doing, the amount of effort that they put into their artwork and their creativity. You get the feeling, or you can sort of evaluate based on those data points that this artist is someone who's serious about his craft. He's not just doing it with dad's money. He's not just doing it because his uncle is an industrialist and says, beta, ye do, paise lo, ek album bana. If that artist was to put out an NFT and say, look, I need money for this project, and he outlines that project much like a crowdfunder, I know that I would invest in that artist because you can see it. You can see where this artist is going to go. And maybe the artist fails. Maybe the artist loses his voice. Maybe the artist falls in love with a girl or a boy and then, their career goes in a completely different path. Maybe they discover that, they want to be a scuba diving instructor on an island in the Bahamas and be a bartender in their spare time. And that's the purpose of their life. And that project goes down the drain. That's fine. But you've got to see those data points in order to be able to invest in a particular artist.
And it's less about Web3 and more about the talent in music, you're saying, right? You don't really need a Web3 platform.
And those are the utilities. Now, developing utilities over an NFT is up to your imagination. As an artist, you can say, look, you can earn royalties from all the music that I'm going to produce. You can hang out with me backstage. I'm going to do a music festival for 50 people in the Maldives once a year. And if you own this NFT, then you will be invited to it. You can build any kind of utilities onto it. Every week, I'm going to have a cup of coffee with a fan. Holding this NFT will give you the right to be in a lottery for that cup of coffee with me, right? So you can build any kinds of utilities like I'm talking about onto NFTs. The fractionalized earning from existing catalog is a very interesting utility that I think some record labels are getting into. And the example that I like to give them is Hey Jude by the Beatles. Yeah. You've got a lot of Beatles fans who would love to just have a plaque on the wall saying, I own a piece of Hey Jude. You can fractionalize Hey Jude into, and ideally speaking, you would do it 49% to the public and 51% to yourself, so you never lose control over the asset. And that 49% could be broken up into 1 billion pieces, and people could earn theoretically from royalties of Hey Jude getting played on different platforms or from sync rights, so on and so forth. But a fan would just want to say, hey, I own a piece of Hey Jude, even if I earn no money from it, or if I earn 10 cents a year from it.
For vanity, right? Like as a fan, it's awesome, right? As passion. So
you can fractionalize NFTs, and if your NFT is valuable enough, you can use it as collateral to raise loan, either in fiat or in cryptocurrency.
That's awesome. Nikhil, on that note, we'll take a quick jump to the segment which we do on our show. It's time for Eka's commandments for future proofing. Web 2 brought social media where it was possible to interact with one another via comments, GIFs, photos, and videos. And this brought the world a little closer. Web 3 is all set to take things one major step forward. People can now have their virtual avatars hang out with one another and attend digital offices, virtual classrooms, online concerts, etc. You know of work from home, right? But you can now even party from home. Recently, someone in India even held a wedding on the metaverse, attended by 500 guests. Talking of doing things virtually, there has been one platform that has been helping IT departments all over the world help their users remain safe and manage their PC while they work from home. I'm talking about Intel's vPro line of processors. Intel vPro provides modern management options to remotely discover, repair, and help protect PCs in your entire organization, which will help simplify support and improve user experience. Intel vPro, built for business. And we are back in the fascinating conversation about NFTs, Web3, blockchain, and music with the fascinating Nikhil Chinapa. Nikhil, we were talking about fractional NFTs. Let's take a few examples of some bands which have released their NFTs, right? So
before we go into that question, Eka, and because we've just come back from the break, the other thing that I want to underline again over here is what I brought up earlier on in our podcast about how we're not able to bring people who aren't into Web3 into the Web3 community. And this conversation that we're having right now kind of underlines the problem that we're facing. A lot of the things that we're talking about, a lot of the terms that we're using, a lot of the experiences that we're discussing over here are from a space that most people have no clue about. We're talking about the fractionalization of a digital asset into NFTs that can earn in a fractionalized manner.
You want to explain that?
And most people don't get it. It's like, tu kya bol raha hai?
Should I try to explain that?
It's easy to understand if you get into it, but there's no reason for somebody to get into it.
Why not? Yeah, Nikhil, see, that's the future, right? Like what you were speaking about email, and this is just what we discussed earlier, right? Where you were asking, why do we need an email? See, a lot of people who are entering this space right now, they are born into, it's the screenagers. I used to use that word, right? At MTV, like screenagers, watching on TV, watching on your phone, watching on your tablet. And at the end of the day, it makes sense, right? It makes sense. Why? Because Web 1 was probably read, Web 2 was read and write, Web 3 is read, write and own, right? And when it comes to read, write and own, logic says that if there's an asset, which can be, say, a song, right? And you realize that there is earning potential in a song. Logic says that ownership of that song, if made simple because of blockchain and trackable and through smart contracts, payments can go out where trust, right? Trust is the biggest word when it comes to Web3 and blockchain, right? If that utopian, I would still say utopian and science fiction world, if it becomes true, then that particular song, and that's what Nikhil just said, right, before the break, using the example of Hey Jude, if we use that song and we break that down into, say, 49%, because at the end of the day, you feel the artist should still own the song rather than, unless the artist is really desperate, right, and can't pay for his bills. So what happens is, people can own that, and every time the song is played on any platform, anywhere in the world, in the metaverse, in a game, in a future, in a future platform like TikTok and all, you will get automatically money into your account. It's logical, right? Like that's where I'm saying that, which is why I'm an evangelist, right? Apart from the cryptocurrency aspect of it, a lot of the stuff which we're talking about, it's called future-proofing because, 2-3 years later, when people will hear this episode, they'll be like, shit, man, Nikhil spoke about this and it's happening right now. Which is why I think, and it's important to have these conversations, right? Because most of the conversations about blockchain end at crypto, right? Most of the people say that if you invested 15 rupees in 2010, it would be 15 lakhs. And then there's a little bit of FOMO and people are like, shit, I don't want to talk. I could have made so much money. But if you remove that aspect of it, right? And if you look at the logical aspect of it, I think it makes sense, right? You disagree?
No, I don't disagree at all, man. I don't disagree at all. I do believe that this is the future. I do believe that this will grow. There may be some opposition from record labels. There may be some opposition from people who are actually hoarding money right now that doesn't rightfully belong to them. And if there is a way of getting that money to the rightful rights holders of the works of music and the digital assets, then yeah, we should do it. And I think the world will move towards that. And
Record labels should be leading this, I think. I think it's the same thing what you mentioned earlier when we were chatting, right? Like it's not Viacom who bought YouTube. It was Google.
Yeah, so I don't think record labels will lead it because it relinquishes control for them. It's going to be an issue for them. And they like being all controlling and powerful. We were talking about, actually what Eka was referring to is, we were talking about, what killed off music on MTV and to put it in one sentence, I think it was YouTube. When music became accessible at any point in time, you could just type in your favorite artist song and the song would play on YouTube. There was no need to do what I used to do, which is put on MTV, turn it on, leave it on, used to be the tagline of MTV when I first started watching it in the late 90s, to wait for that favorite song to come on, to wait for Runaway Train by Soul Asylum to come on. I would just kind of leave the television on, and it would be on MTV, and it would just be playing continuously.
Or we would and this is a little bit of where my first experience with Nikhil was MTV Select, right? We would wait in the evening and make a call, and rather than hoping for the algorithm of MTV to throw up a song, you could actually dial in and ask for a song, right?
Yeah.
And that completely changed to right now. You just ask Google, right? You just ask YouTube, play my song, and you don't have to wait anymore. And we've seen crazy evolution happening over there on demand, right?
The other thing that killed off MTV was when YouTube went up for sale, and I think Viacom, the parent company that owns MTV, put in a bid for it, but Google won the bid. As we all know, it was owned by Google. But if Viacom had won the bid for it, then all of MTV's assets would be sitting on YouTube, and they would kind of, help each other out, much like how Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp.
I don't know, maybe it would have just been a closed world. And you know how record labels, we were saying, right? Like ownership, like they wouldn't allow, UGC wouldn't have been UGC if it was probably a big established media company which took over. I don't know.
Well, ifs and buts, man. We never know which way the world would have turned if Viacom had won that bid for YouTube. But YouTube is with Google right now, and it is doing what it's doing. I think it's a great platform. It allows for a lot of discovery. But I think payouts to artists need to be restructured.
I was reading 1,250 streams of a song on YouTube Music gets you $1. How do you make a living off that, Nikhil?
You can't. So the thing is, the truth is, by selling 25 or 30 NFTs, music NFTs at 0.01 ETH will probably earn you more than 1 million streams on a streaming platform.
But why will people buy it? Is it and this is what I asked you before also, NFTs. Do you think it's the greater fool theory which is at play right through NFTs, which is like, I don't know why I'm buying this, but I know there's going to be someone else who's going to be willing to pay a little more than what I am.
You know what happened to Jack Dorsey's tweet, right?
Yeah, like the whole NFT. That was the first NFT which he'd put out, right? His
Jack
first tweet
Dorsey's
on Twitter.
first tweet was an NFT. I think it sold for what? Was it $9 million that it sold for? Was it $97 million?
Ridiculous amount of money. Yeah.
I mean, we're just getting that data out right now. Our scientists and our research team is working on that. The guy who bought it tried to resell it, and I think the highest bid, if I'm not mistaken, was $600. Nobody gave a damn. So the question that you asked was, why should anybody buy it? That's an answer that the artist needs to come up with. That question needs to be answered by the artist, because you can say, hey, I'm into Web3, I'm into blockchain, I'm doing this music NFT, it's so cool. And I actually read this tweet by one guy saying, where's the NFT community? I've put out like 6 NFTs on OpenSea and there's not a single bid for it. So Jack Dorsey's first tweet went for $2.9 million. The guy who bought it tried to resell it, and I think the highest bid was $600 or something.
He couldn't find a greater fool.
Nobody. And then he went like, oh, but I never really want to sell it. It's really valuable. I'm going to hang on to it. I'm like, idiot.
For passion, maybe.
I actually questioned it when it happened. I did a show back then, and I was talking to somebody who's part of the NFT community here in India, and I was like, where's the value in this? Because, there are so many famous celebrities who put out their first tweet. So there's nothing rare about this. Yeah. There's no utility factor to it. Why is this a collectible? This is completely speculative.
Maybe 100 years down the line.
I doubt it.
Maybe when Elon Musk totally changes Twitter.
Let's go back to my first point. People are more interested in making money than they are about utility. So the guy who bought this was hoping to flip it for a higher number.
Okay, let's talk about utility. Okay, so Kings of Leon, a band, they launched a couple of NFTs, and it was interesting. Okay, so
their album came out as an NFT, right?
Yeah. So that's one aspect of it. One is album coming out as an NFT, and then nothing utilitarian in that. So they said, okay, let's do something around utility and fan engagement. So I think 4 front seat tickets for the rest of your life, and if the band becomes bigger, great, the amount you've paid probably will escalate. And also, crafted vinyl of their album and meet and greet, etc. Is that utility enough?
Idea acha hai, but look, one of the best selling NFTs in the world right now are the NBA NFTs. Right?
Yeah.
I think they're called Top Shot.
Yeah, Top Shots. We have a whole episode on that.
There you go. So, an article that I read about Top Shots, and they go for various prices across the board.
Yeah, so we discussed a $10 million NFT which went.
But the most amount of business happens in the $50 bracket.
Yeah.
Right? So I'll come back, if I map that onto Kings of Leon, the number of people who'd be interested in that particular NFT, if you're going to trade in it later on, significantly lower than somebody trading in an NFT which has more utility but is less rare. It's kind of like in Bandra, if you have a 1-bedroom house, that will rent out faster than a 5-bedroom house.
True.
The number of people in the market for a 5-bedroom house significantly lower than the number of people in the market for a 1-bedroom house. And I think that's another aspect that artists need to look at. Where exactly am I in the pecking order of artists and fans? And if I create an NFT that is super valuable, but is valuable to 3 people, then the trading is going to happen between 3 people. But if I create an NFT that maybe 300 people would be interested in, then that's my market size.
Very interesting.
So where do you want to be? You could do both. I'm not saying one is right and the other is wrong. You could do 3 NFTs for, let's say, $1,000 each, or you could do 300 NFTs for $20 each. Make a little more money.
And you have to hope the people who are buying understand that maybe they'll be able to make some money, or they're genuine fans who'll just buy it for collectibles.
So the $1,000 NFT, if something magnificent happens to you, let's say you're Kate Bush and you record a song in the 1980s, and all of a sudden that song is on the Stranger Things soundtrack, and the whole world is suddenly listening to that song again, which is like unbelievable. So if that happens, then your $1,000 NFT suddenly becomes $10,000. Yeah. But there's a greater chance of your $20 NFT going to $25 or $28 or $32, right? And there's 300 people trading in that space. So think about it.
Makes great sense. Nikhil, a little more, okay? You've been part of events and festivals, right? Like right from stuff which probably you don't like talking about, like Sunburn early days. Probably if there was a smart contract back then, you would still be helming Sunburn. Then Submerge, your company, and doing a lot of festivals. I want to talk a little about festivals, metaverse, okay? And an example of, again, I was reading, everyone like on social media knows Coachella, right? And Coachella did some NFTs this time. And I wanted to know, like, tell me if it's again crap, hype, PR. So they did 3 NFTs, okay? One NFT, again, like what we spoke about Kings of Leon, right? You buying a ticket and it gives you entry for life, right? So imagine the festival wraps up, you've lost that money. But if Coachella becomes more and more famous, probably your ticket value increases. Then they've done bits and pieces of the entire show, entire festival cut into little small videos, pics, etc. Again, in the $20-$30 bracket. And then they've done another NFT, which is in the makes you feel good as part of an art you're owning. So they give you a physical piece of some physical mantle along with some recording, etc. Which of these 3 makes sense, and do they not make sense at all?
They all make sense, and none of them make sense. I don't think there's any such thing as crap or hype or something for PR value. You've got to try different things and see what works. There's no reason for you to not try something despite all your friends telling you and everybody around you advising you that it's not going to work. There's no reason why you shouldn't try it if you have a gut feeling around it. Research has shown that as a musician, if an album back in the day used to cost, $9.99, that's what you paid for an album. They did research and they found out that a super fan would pay up to $150 to interact or to have something meaningful or a meaningful engagement with their artist, with the artist that they love. Right? If you're going to work in Web3, if you're going to take your music and take it to Web3 and you're going to do various things with it, and let's say right now we're talking about NFTs, you've got to think about it from that point of view. You may want to just put an album out as an NFT and somebody will say, okay, I'll buy this for $9.99. Or like Kickstarter programs do, you may want to give them more and more benefits. You pay a little more money, your name goes onto the album. You pay a little more money, I send you the album and a t-shirt. You pay a little more money, I'll come and perform for your friends in your house. You can build in various utilities into those NFTs, and depending on how you as an artist grow, the value of those NFTs, as long as they're tradable, becomes, less and more. It again is left up to your imagination, and it's hard to do that. Let me underline that point, because most people talk about social media being hard for artists. They're like, hey man, should I write a song or should I figure out whether I should take a picture of my breakfast and post it on Instagram? I'm an artist. I want to make music. I want to write songs and I want to perform songs. That's what I do. But your
breakfast might get more likes than your real song, right? Like
many artists are not able to think. Many artists are not able to think along the lines of what should I do for social media? Like I'm getting a haircut. Should I take a picture of me like taking a haircut and, is that going to get me traction? Similarly, artists who are, consummate musicians who can only think about writing music and performing music are going to find it very difficult to think about what does my fan want? How do I interact with my fan? Should I do this as an NFT? Should I make a t-shirt? Should I make a sticker? Should I make a video game? And that is
and people
hard.
will slowly figure it out, right? Like
some people will do it very easily, and some people never will.
I think FOMO will drive this, like a lot of people.
Eka, that's the issue. Everybody's FOMOing.
Yeah.
And what I want to say is, listen, man, calm down. You don't have to do all of this right now. I would always say that regardless of what's happening in technology, what's happening on streaming platforms, at the core of your existence as a musician is the music. Focus on that. As the music gets better and as more people start to like the songs that you're writing and playing, you will attract people who will want to manage you and want to help you. you hopefully will tie up with the right management team that will then help you develop the NFTs, the touring program, the brand associations, and all of those things that go along with becoming an ultra successful musician. But till then, just focus on the music. The smart contracts will come, and they should come. They will be very valuable. Blockchain technology will help you monetize your assets and your work and your career in a much better way. But right now, if it's very difficult for you to deal with all of that, please don't deal with it. Just focus on the music. And if you can deal with it, sure, go ahead, have fun. And if you can help somebody else out, because we really do need to onboard more people into this community, because it's very difficult for people to understand and it's very intimidating.
True. Okay, another question to help our viewers, right? What does the metaverse mean to you, Nikhil?
I think it's going to be a fun plaything. Okay. Much like Xbox and PlayStation, the people who do it are going to absolutely love it. People like me who don't own an Xbox or a PlayStation will be like, hey, I like going scuba diving.
No, but like in music, right? Do you see people attending virtual music concerts, right? And earlier I would say no, but we saw the pandemic came in, affected a lot of musicians, live performances, etc. across the world, right? And slowly people started paying a little for, say, live performances through Zoom. I don't know. I didn't, but I'm sure some people did, right? Do you see in the future, in the metaverse, right? Like people partying, like you want to party with people in Australia, Sweden, etc. Your friends out there, everyone wearing virtual headwear and dancing in this metaverse, which is they're not there, but they're still there, right? Do you think that's happening?
Let's talk about two types of virtual experiences. One which was very successful. I think Veer Das did a whole bunch of stand-up routines for people at home through Zoom. That was very, very successful. And a lot of people did streaming sets from their homes, which was not so successful because beyond a point, Tinku from the second floor was also streaming along with Coldplay. So like what stream do you listen to? The experience of Veer Das, of course, much better in an auditorium when you can hear other people laughing around you and the atmosphere is amazing. But since it's spoken word and the artist is in front of you and you can see his facial expressions clearly because the camera is that close, probably was a great experience. I saw some clips. I never watched one of his entire shows, but I can understand why people would want to pay money to have that kind of an experience.
Because you feel that you're there, right?
No, the experience is still complete, even if you're not physically in the room.
Okay.
Music, however, concerts especially, if you're not in the room, it's a whole different experience. But you are right. With the pandemic, people have gotten used to the idea that, I can pay $5 and I can't be there myself. So I don't mind paying the $5 to experience this. But let me ask you this. Your favorite music festival, would you rather be there on the front line, leaning against the Mojo barricades and screaming your head off to the songs of the artists that you love? Or would you rather be doing that sitting in your living room, wearing headphones, screaming at your laptop?
I think that's age, Nikhil. It depends, right? And honestly, if you think about it, a lot of people, apart from a particular band, right? A lot of people would love to go to a music festival, but as you age, you realize it comes with traffic, it comes with commotion, it comes with you might not even.
Eka, you're the wrong demographic, Eka. You're the wrong demographic.
No, but I'm being realistic,
I'm
right?
talking about experiencing music, right? For example, let's say I'm an audiophile. I've got the best audio sound system in the world, and I'm a huge jazz fan. North Sea Jazz Festival is going to do a streaming thing in 4K audio, and it's going to be amazing. I might actually go in for that. I might pay $50 and say, man, I'm going to stream this through my system. I'm going to get a glass of whiskey. I'm going to sit back in my favorite armchair right in the middle of my 2 tower speakers, and I'm going to be blown away because the TV's there. It's going to be way better than actually being there. But when you're 19, 20, 25, 30 years old and you want to kind of feel and smell the sweat of the person next to you.
It's a more community aspect, right? Like you're talking about like probably extroverts, introverts, I don't know. Maybe because music festival experience, rarely have I seen someone go to a festival alone, right? It's more like friends, or you, even if someone's going alone, you'll go and make new friends, right? Like rarely have I seen.
The metaverse will have to figure out how to create the community experience.
Completely.
Right? When you go to a music festival, you've got the lights, the lasers, the fireworks, the people around you. And to a certain extent, the lights and lasers and fireworks, you may be able to simulate that. You may be able to find a digital version of it. But what is the community experience? What is the experience of chatting to a girl that you met while standing in a queue to get a drink at the bar?
True. Like that's where connections are made, right?
And they have done that as well. They've got like tags of people, and you can engage in a private chat with them in a private chat room, and you can exchange phone numbers and things like that. So they are trying to fix for it and solve for it, but it just feels very aseptic. There was a movie, I'm trying to remember which movie this was, where a guy comes back from many years ago, and then this, he gets friendly with this police officer, and then they sort of consent to having sex, and she hands him a headset. and goes, "This is how we have sex now. This is like many years
like
in
a
the
Black
future."
Mirror episode, right?
And he was like, "Wait, there's no exchange of bodily fluids?" And like, "Oh, bodily fluids? No, we don't do that." So
Crazy.
I can go on about this, man. One of the reasons people went to bars and clubs, and people have continued to go to bars and clubs, is sex.
Yeah, completely.
To meet other people and to hook up with them.
Yeah.
When platforms like Tinder and especially Grindr for the gay community, when Grindr came up, it killed off a lot of gay bars in Amsterdam because people didn't need to go to these venues
to find people,
to meet
on the same
like-minded
frequency,
people and to hook up with them. So they were able to do it online. So music festivals do that to a certain extent. It's not just the music, it's the experience, it's the community experience, it's socializing. The metaverse right now doesn't necessarily give you all of those features, but I still think it's a great business model and it is a great streaming potential. I mean, it's a great revenue potential model for the future.
Great. Nikhil, now slightly wrapping up. You're a young dad, I would say, right? And I heard a episode of you speaking to Rishi K where you were talking about limiting screen time to your daughter, and that's what I want to ask, right? Like in this world where pretty much you're born into screens, right? Like every kid who's pretty much like screens everywhere. How do you see your daughter consuming music 10 to 15 years down the line?
Man, if anybody has the answer to that, you'd make a hell of a lot of money. You'd make a ton of money if you had the answer.
But we are
I don't know.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping that she's able to experience music, whatever experiencing means to her. I think that if you introduce kids to music videos early on and they just watch the music video as opposed to hearing the music and then dancing to it or playing when they're listening to music, it changes the way you experience that song. And in my opinion, the dancing and the playing around while listening to music is a better experience than watching it as a music video on screen.
Do you listen to music with her apart from rhymes like Wheels on the Bus?
Yeah.
Yeah.
She listens. Her mom actually plays a lot of very interesting, Ella Fitzgerald and
Wow.
all of those artists from the 60s and the 70s. So that there's a lot of that being played at home, along with some DJ Snake and some One Direction, and her favorite song is a Meghan Trainor song where she likes to dance along to.
So let me predict, right? So maybe 15 years down the line, maybe the Coldplay gig which you went to and you really liked, someone recorded it, right, and recreated that in the metaverse, and then you tell your daughter, come, let us travel back in time and try to experience it. And maybe technology will be in a place where you're probably wearing headsets and you can actually revisit a gig, right? I'm sure somewhere down the line it still sounds slightly science fiction-y, but it might happen, right?
Quantum computing is possible. And I don't think that the current processors we have will be able to recreate an experience to that level of
volumetric
detail.
VR is going to be an issue, but probably in the future as technology is rapidly evolving, I think that might be happening.
Yeah, but
right?
if we get to that position where we're able to experience that thanks to quantum computing, bang goes Bitcoin.
Nikhil, there's one series which we do in all our episodes, and this is especially for our younger listeners, probably aspiring musicians. But music is not just about musicians, right? There are so many technicians and people who work in the music world. What are the skill sets which will be absolutely obsolete in the music world in the next 10-15 years? And what are the skill sets you really need to be gaining if you want to make some money and make a splash in this music space over the next decade?
Man, that's such a difficult one to answer. I spoke briefly about how difficult it is for some musicians to figure out what to post on social media because, bookers, club managers looking at somebody's social profile has become one way of measuring how much to pay an artist or whether we should book an artist to your venue. Similarly, a musician has to focus on his music, and there's many other aspects to becoming successful. As you mentioned, there's a support crew, there's various people that work in the gig industry, in the nightlife industry, in the music industry itself. So it's very difficult to pinpoint what you can give up on or what will become obsolete or what will become more valuable. It is going to be a minefield to navigate going forward. I don't think that's going to change, but I don't think that's ever changed. When we spoke about, I did a conversation about social media, and I'll put this in perspective. And, there was one person saying, this was on the BBC, that, back then we didn't have social media. We didn't have algorithms that, fed you information. And I was like, no, actually you're wrong, because you had radio hosts that you would try and get your music to in order to get your song played on radio. And you would write your music in order for it to be a radio-friendly tune. And the algorithms always existed, except they were human algorithms. The radio host decided what to play and what to put in before you. as opposed to it being a machine learning computer, which is what's doing the algorithm right now. So there were always aspects that you chased. No one came to your front door and threw money at you and said, perform. You sought out record labels, you sought out publicists, you sought out people who wrote articles about you in magazines and music magazines, you sought out DJs to play your music in clubs, you sought out, radio hosts and presenters to play your music on radio. So you always had to do more things than just write and produce music in order for your music to be heard by a larger audience. And that ultimately is the end objective to get your music in front of more people.
True.
In various forms, either as a live experience, either as a TikTok video, either as a video on a streaming platform, or you listening to it, or as an NFT, or as a gaming experience. That is the ultimate objective. The rules of the game continuously evolve, but the fundamentals remain the same. You still have all these tools and technology at your disposal. You just need to figure out who can help you navigate those tools or use those tools to the best effect in order to achieve the core. The core principle still is getting your music out in front of more audiences. So it's a hard one to try and predict and say, this will become obsolete and this will be more valuable. But all I will say to musicians is that, don't ever lose focus on the music, because at the core of it all, that's the only thing that matters.
Thank you, Nikhil. That was a fascinating answer and a great conversation. Any last shout outs to any young upcoming musicians who you like, or do you listen to any music related podcasts, or who's your favorite musician now? Yeah? That's something which we didn't really ask you.
Man, that's like asking a DJ, what's your favorite song?
I know, that's
your playlist changes every night. You're like, my favorite song.
That's why I left
5,000 songs on my pen drive, which is just the pen drive that I've downloaded this week.
That's why I left it till the end, right?
No, actually, I think my favorite song right now, jokes apart, is the Meghan Trainor song, Better When I'm Dancing. Or is it Happy When I'm Dancing? I keep forgetting the name. Is it
That's because of your daughter, right?
It's because of my daughter, because I'm fascinated watching her dance to that song. So I'm not really paying attention to the song as much as I'm fascinated watching her. So I think that's my current favorite.
Thank you so much, Nikhil. It's been a great conversation. Thanks
My pleasure,
so much.
man. I really enjoyed this.
Thanks so much. And that was such a cool episode of Future Proofing, presented by Intel vPro, built for business. If you liked this episode, please like it, share it, subscribe to it, and rate it across all platforms. And we also have some good news for you. After all this NFT conversation, we are actually dropping some really cool NFTs and future-proofing merchandise. Simple contest. You just have to answer a simple question about what we discussed on the episode. More details are on the IVM socials. You can find them at IVM Podcasts across all social media platforms. You can also follow me at Ekalavya across Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Ekalavya B on Twitter. Thank you so much, and see you on our next episode of Future Proofing.